Welcome to Garage Talk. As always, I'm Conrad. Let's go.
I'm Ted. It's time to rock and roll.
Hey, Teddy. Today we got Mrs. Cinewall School Board at Large, Chris Cunningham. How we doing, Chris?
Doing great.
How exactly does the school board function?
Okay, it's a good question. I'd like to say I guess I had that prefed for me a little bit. Some of the questions about school board members are elected, and the way that we have it set up in the Missinawall schools is there's representatives that live in particular districts, and then they run for particular positions based upon that. So, for instance, there's 4 at-large positions, and those can live anywhere in the school corporation to be elected to the board. Then there is a Gas City, a Jonesboro, and then a Mill Township seat. So everybody, it's a misconception I think that some people have. Everybody can vote for whoever is a candidate, but you have to live in that particular district to run for that. So, for instance, our outgoing president, Spike Gaskin, is a Mill Township, representative. So the only person that could then run for that is somebody who lives in a Mill Township seat. So outside of Gas City and Jonesboro city limits is where they'd have to be in order to be able to be elected as a member. And then some of the other questions about a school board for that part of it is their responsibilities as a school board member.
Yeah.
And so the primary responsibilities of
Their
of the
role
school
and
board
responsibility.
member, their major responsibilities. There's other things that come into it, but major responsibilities are, and their biggest responsibility is picking and hiring the superintendent. But besides that, they do policy development and review. They also approve the general budget that we have, so finances is a big part of it. And then finally, any kind of action that's going to happen by the school corporation is also validated and approved by the school board. So nothing that gets done that revolves around the school corporation should be done unless it's been voted on and approved by the school board.
Okay. Well, how does that role differ from the role of superintendent or administrator?
Okay, so the superintendent is employed by the school board, and so his job is to run the corporation. And sometimes it's a misconception from people. They think we do the hiring, we do the firing, that is the superintendent's responsibility. But it is it's kind of a symbiotic relationship because the things that the superintendent does affects our community. And so we as a board then provide input to him about, hey, these are the things that we see in our corporation. These are the things that we've noticed in our corporation. And so he takes those into account. We're in the process now of, looking at a really major project that is going to require committees that are going to get together and meet. So there'll be people from the community that'll be involved to be able to make some of those decisions about our projects. But the superintendent is an employee of the board, and beyond that, he does everything else for the corporation.
Okay, Chris, what qualities should an exemplary school board member have?
You ever watch Ted Lasso? You guys ever watch Ted Lasso?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that I always liked about one of his is he talks about being curious. And I think that's a great quality to have as a school board member. You're curious about how things work, why they work that way. The Indiana School Board Association gives you a wealth of information to be able to be a good school board member. They offer all kinds of trainings and information about what you should do. But an exemplary board member has an open mind, but they're also, it's kind of a mixture between an open mind, but at the same time, they need to be an advocate for what they believe. And so, you need to be passionate about what you do, but you need to be curious. And I've learned over the years to listen to the other board members about what they have to say, because they all have an idea or an opinion. And so when you learn to listen to other people, then it helps you makes you a better board member, but it also ends up coming out as a better decision for our community. So those are some just off-the-cuff qualities I can think of.
Okay. How long do you believe a school board member should keep running for re-election?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever had that one before. I guess you shouldn't run anymore if you don't have a passion to serve. If you don't have a passion to serve your community, it takes a lot of time. Some people, might think that it doesn't, but it takes a lot of time, and you put in a lot of effort in it. And so, I think you've got to be prepared to put in the time, and then you need to be passionate about what you do. And if you're not passionate about doing it, then you probably shouldn't. I've talked to board members at ISBAs who've been doing it for 35 or 40 years, and I've talked to it for other ones that they've ran one term and said, "I've had enough. I don't want to do it anymore."
Yeah.
So I think that's really what judges it. Are you passionate about it, and are you willing to put in the time and effort to make it what it needs to be?
Can you dip down in that memory of yours and share an experience of working with parents, community members, the business community, and human service agencies?
Okay. Let me give you an example about working with human services. So we used to run a program through our office called the Truancy Intervention Program.
Mm-hmm.
And so kids were missing school. They weren't coming to school. And usually the situations that we saw with that were around the elementary. And so we brought together a collective group of people to sit down and say, okay, how do we solve these problems? And so we came up with a pretty decent rubric. And so we had school administrators, school attendants, prosecutor's office. We had social service agencies, family services, all getting involved. And I think we came up with a pretty good process to make sure that kids would be in school. And really, what it boiled down to was working with the parents for them to be, accountable to making sure that their kids at school. At a certain age, you should be responsible for yourself to be able to get to school. But many of the problems we were seeing were at, the elementary level and getting that addressed. Also working with, I guess you'd asked about working with parents in other areas. And I think I mentioned this the last time that we talked, but most of the time it revolves around a lack of communication between one or the other. And usually it's the situation to where a parent has heard from their child and they've thought that something was happening that it wasn't, or it was a miscommunication from one or the other. And so I've followed this rubric for 20-some years now, is that usually if a parent comes to me and says, look, I've got an issue with this teacher, I will ask them if they've talked to the teacher. Mm-hmm. And they'll say no, that's why I'm coming to you. And I say, well, the person with the problem has the best solution. So if you think that this is an issue and they're worried, they say, oh, they're going to take it out on my son or daughter, or I said, no, they aren't going to do that. Just go and talk to them. And when they do that, they go and talk to them. I think I said this last time, I can only think of 2 times that when I've given people that advice of talking to the teacher, that it didn't get worked out. Okay. So then they talked to and the 2 times we had after that, my advice was go to the principal. And then I always tell them, if you don't like what the principal's telling you, then I'll be happy to go with you to the superintendent, if that's the case. But it's never made it past that.
Okay.
So I think once people start communicating, there's a fly circling around here. Yeah. Then that's usually what happens.
So there's a chain of command.
Yeah.
A hierarchy.
Yeah. and it works really well. I think it's worked really well for me.
Okay.
I think early on, the biggest risk I think for school board members is they feel like they got to get in there and solve the problem.
Yeah.
But then what happens is that ends up bringing you more problems, and the people that really need to learn how to work and communicate, you're teaching them skills that they're doing it in elementary. They're going to move along, and once those parents learn those skills, they're going to communicate more with their teachers, and the kid's going to do better. They're going to do better as parents about buying into what's going on.
Okay.
All right, now we all know that, we're increasing student-wise. Mm-hmm. Okay, so with the increase in the out-of-district students impacting our operational funding, how do you propose balancing the budget while ensuring quality education for all students?
Well, it's not something that I can do alone. I mean, it takes we've got a committed board, and we've got a committed superintendent. We've got a bunch of other committed people to make sure that happens. But some of the things that we have to look at that for us is we have some projects that are coming off of, that are being completed, that the tax rate is going to change. And so I think what we'll want to do is look at how do we phase in these projects so that it's not so tax prohibitive for the people. Okay. And the other thing is with a lot of them is the corporation that we have right now of being able to do all the things. So there's usually a list that starts out, and that's why we'll have these community meetings, is to hear from the public about what are the things that they see. We think a lot of those things are going to match up to what has come from our consultants, but it's always good to hear, what they have to say. So I think it's a balance that we have to go through, because there's some people you'll talk to that say, I don't want you doing anything that's going to raise my taxes. Well, we can't really do that, because even the kids that we have here now, those that are resident kids, we've got to make sure that we take care of them as well. And that means by letting other people come into the corporation and getting the money that comes from that, it gives us the ability to do all the advanced programming that we have. We wouldn't be able to do the programming that we have without those funds. So,
What's your plan to continue supporting teachers and staff and maintaining morale and job satisfaction, particularly given the challenges of the staffing and financial constraints?
okay. Well, I think we've done a really good job of addressing teacher salaries. Our previous superintendent, Leslie Winter, worked really hard about doing that, but all that came about by the additional funding that we were able to generate. And so I know I would like to see the teacher salaries continue to raise. I know we've talked about this before, but I started out in teaching. I worked in a self-contained classroom with high-risk kids, and there is not a more difficult job on the planet. I don't know of a more difficult job than teaching. And so I think they deserve to be compensated accordingly. So the state legislature has set some rubrics for teachers and pay for that. I'm hoping that they'll follow through with funding to be able to allow that to happen. And so I think that's one of my priorities. The other thing is our corporation strategic plan. A strategic plan is like a map for us, for our corporation. And so, my hope is that once that strategic plan is done, that, not everybody's in a position for a long time. And so, but if you have a plan, if you have a map, a road map, to get you where you need to go, then no matter who comes in, or whether you have a new superintendent or you have new board members, they've got something to follow. And then the last thing, it's not the last thing that I would look at, is the new building project. Funding for what it is we want to do is going to be very difficult, so it's going to require a lot of advanced planning, on our part. And that really revolves around our business manager and the finance people that we deal with, Baker Tilly, to be able to help us. Do we do this in phases? Mm-hmm. Can we absorb it all at one time? And so but again, it's going to take everybody, working together. I don't have all the answers. I do have questions, but like I said, I'm curious.
How would you plan to support initiatives that promote work-life balance and mental health resources for staff, recognizing the increasing demands placed on educators and support personnel?
Oh, well, one of the things that we have that's included with the project is daycare, to provide daycare for our staff. That's, on our list of, and if you look at anything, I mean, Indiana suffers with having appropriate childcare. Mm-hmm. And let alone if you can find, and I'm just not talking about our teachers, I'm talking about our paras or, anyone else. So you look at anybody who's, trying to make a living, and they spend so much on childcare that it's almost not enough for them to be able to have a job. And so I think that's one of the things that we put in there as a priority, is to look at daycare for that part of it. We've added through contracts with Radiant to be able to provide counseling, and that's for students and staff. So I think, and one of our board members, Susan Miller, works for Radiant, and so when I have any of those questions that revolve around that, I go to her and I ask her what she thinks and what she thinks would be a good idea to be able to help us. So, but I don't think I've ever seen, and I guess it'd be a good question to ask our teachers, a more stressful time to be in education, because you're getting pulled from one direction and then you're getting pulled from the other. And I think my goal, I know it's our board's goal, is to make sure that our staff are happy in what they do. I think you see that. I mean, if you look at the percentage of Miss Cinewall graduates that are teaching here at Miss Cinewall instead of other corporations, and I'd like to see a higher percentage of people in the state that aren't working within the corporation than what we have.
Okay, you probably answered this a couple questions ago, but it's still kind of on the same page. But given the limited tax levy revenue, how would you prioritize facility maintenance and upgrades in the district?
You know what? I guess my first thought on that is to continuing to lean on Ted, who's takes care of all of our facilities, mm-hmm. And I'd really lean heavily on the staff. We have a great staff. We have Ted and Jared who take care of our buildings. They got all the questions, but they also have a lot of the answers. Mm-hmm. So some of the projects that we're talking about now are directly related to the input that we got from them. Look, we can't continue to spend all this money on this. It's a pit. I mean, we're not getting anywhere with it. So I'd lean heavily on what it is they had to say, and then if there were specific things that I had questions on, I'd do my research. I'd look at other corporations and get advice from other people. But most of that, I think I would lean heavily on the staff that we have and what their opinions are.
Okay. Now, we mentioned earlier about the increase in student enrollment.
Uh-huh.
Years ago that was usually for athletic purposes. Mm-hmm. Now, I might be stretching myself, but I'm saying 90% of it would be to come over here for academics.
Yeah, I think the academics and the access that kids have to AP classes, I mean, and other school corporations are doing it. I feel like that is a big draw for many of the kids that we have and that participate. They have, we have kids who have graduated, and by the time they graduate, they've got enough credits for an associate degree. We've got one that graduated from high school, and by the time he'd finished, he has an LPN.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just going to continue to grow for us. And John Maxwell talks about it as about momentum. So it's like once a corporation has momentum, if there's a crisis or something that happens and that stops momentum, but once you have momentum going, and then everybody kind of gets behind that momentum and pushes. And so we just keep coming up with new ways to do different things. And that's really, I think it's, again, a blessing. Most of that is the credit to our dedicated people that we have between our staff and administrators and everybody that puts forth the effort to make sure that that happens. But that's, I think, one of the blessings I think that we have. An area that is, I feel like, is going to take off for us, and we're going to continue to look at it, is placing kids in opportunities where they can learn skills. Mm-hmm. And for instance, over at Slingshot right now, they're employing some of our kids, but they're learning a skill and getting credit for it, while at the same time, they're getting paid. And so I think those opportunities are just going to, whether you want to call it DECA on steroids or, I can still remember DECA because that was business, business related. But now it's, branching out. I could see us, developing internships where for plumbers and electrical and those kind of things, because those jobs pay good money. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll be something that'll be our next, within the next 4 to 8 years, you're going to see that in a lot of school corporations around the state.
I do too. Now let's switch it up just a little bit here.
Okay.
Because I want to ask you your vision for improving athletic facilities in the district. It's needed. I mean, more and more sports are added. There's limited space, limited time for practice. But what I really see is some of these kids that they've got talent, but they're not quite there yet. Mm-hmm. We need an intramural program somehow, some way. So a vision for improving our athletic facilities in this district.
Okay, so we've got several things that we're looking at related to facilities that I think would fall into line with that, Ted. One of the things that we're looking at is the addition of the middle school that would move to the high school, and that's going to add several gyms. Mm-hmm. Also, in doing renovations to RJB that we're talking about was that gym would still be utilized, but we're trying to create in that some community space. So I would love to have that happen. I think what we would do is we would end up seeing talking with the city, both cities, as a matter of fact, and looking at what we could do to be able to help or advance what we're doing for kids. Sometimes it's just an opportunity. We were kids. We got out in the neighborhood, mm-hmm. And wasn't nobody policing us. We policed ourselves, and so sometimes I think, we have organized play that we get set up a lot of times, and we, the adults, are running it, but an opportunity for kids to be able to have open gym and be able to, play with each other, with some, adult supervision, mm-hmm. but not running it, like it's right. a boot camp, kind of thing, giving them an opportunity. And I think those, the expansion of what we're doing with those facilities, I think will add to the opportunities that we have.
Okay, I'm going to beat a dead horse here because I know we talked about roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
Of a school board member, an elected official. Could you explain in the simplest way you can what a school board member can do and what they can't do?
Well, we live in a country where you have the freedom to do. Maybe the better question would be what they shouldn't do.
Okay, let's go there.
You know,
Let's go
so
there.
what they shouldn't do, you know, from that part of it. In order to be a good school board member, you know, I think you need to have a knowledge about what's going on, but you should not put yourself in situations to where you're in a situation of supervision of staff. You shouldn't put yourself in a situation to where you're going to tell a teacher what to do, or you're going to tell a principal to what to do, or whatever. That's not your job. Your job is to do the things that you're supposed to do as a board member, which is policy and sticking to, so staying in your lane. If you have feedback, your ability to give that feedback is to the superintendent. And so if you see something that's going on, your job is to be able to say that to him, not to run around and trying to tell people what to do. And this is where this part comes in, is because if you're passionate, sometimes that can happen to people. They get passionate about what they want and what they see, and they want something. They feel like something needs to happen. And this is where, we've had a great board president in Spike Gaskin. He's always great about seeing the big picture, And he doesn't use this word, but it always makes me think of it. It's like, whoa, Nelly, whoa. He will say, hey, that's not your job. That's not your job.
Yeah.
So, and that pretty much, the rest of the board kind of comes around that idea. And for the most part, that's happened. We haven't had those kind of situations happen. So you shouldn't put yourself in a situation to where, and anything that you do, I always tell everybody this, if we're not meeting, you're nobody. If you're not meeting as a board, your power happens, your ability, your authority happens in that board meeting with the other board members. When you leave that board meeting, people think you have, but I can't make anything happen unless I get 3 other board members that think like I do. And if you're wasting your your time and your effort to do something like that, when
I got that question a lot. And I don't know what they thought. I don't know if they thought a school board member can come in there and pound their fist on the table, and that's what happens.
Pound their fist on the table,
but that might not be what happens, right? Okay.
You build, everything rises and falls on relationships.
Okay.
Everything rises and falls on relationships. So when you talk to your fellow board members, they're passionate about what they're passionate about. You are. Sometimes you meet in the middle. Sometimes you hear what they have to say, and you know what? That's better than my idea.
Okay.
And so when you come all together like that, I think there's a synergy that happens with that allows you to do a lot of. The board is greater than the individual pieces. I guess that's the best way I could say it, is that when everybody works together on different things, you get a better outcome.
Well, I'm going to share some stats from the class of 2024, which you were on the school board. 194 graduated last year. 87 of those kids that graduated with honors. That's 39% of the class. That's huge. That is huge. 49 early college and high school graduate. That's 21% of the class. 3 associate degrees, 17 Indiana College Core completions. That's 30 plus college credits before they go to college. That saves money. 35 certificate of completions. 1 LPN certified nurse. That's incredible. And I believe that's why Mississinewa is the best in the county as far as education. And I'm going to open it up on the floor. Anybody want to ask a question? Feel free. All right, go ahead.
I need to know how many seats are open and who is running for what seat currently.
Okay, you want me to do that? Or?
This, yeah.
Okay, all right, so currently, there's 3 seats available, all right? One of those seats is already filled because nobody's running against him, which is Kyle Speakman. And he'll be taking over Spike's position, who's sitting right next to you. And then the other 3 positions, the other seats that are available are at-large positions. And so the people that are running for that are myself, Laney Stearns, and Jared Richards, and Matt Worrell. Those are so there's 4 running, pick 2. I think I said 3 by accident. Yeah, there's 4 running and pick 2. And then Jared Richards and myself are the 2 incumbents. The other 2, Laney and Matt, are people that are running that are brand new to running for the office.
How long have you been on the board?
I've been on the board 28 years. I was first elected in 1996. And believe it or not, when I was first elected, J.C. Knight and East School were still active elementary schools. So that's how long I've been on the board. J.C. Knight, we were using it as an active elementary school then, and so was East Elementary.
Could you explain your role as legislative liaison a little bit?
What was that?
He wanted me to ask too, so you could explain that.
Oh, okay, all right. So each board, they vote on someone to be that's in charge of legislation. And what that means is anything that comes from the state or comes from state associations comes directly to that legislative liaison. And then they distribute it to the board. And they also have a couple of meetings a year that you go to, and you have, they invite so it's sponsored through the Indiana School Board Association, and you invite your local legislators to a meeting. So you have lunch together and then talk about particular issues that you have related to education. So I'm the legislative liaison for our school board, and I've been doing that for quite a while now. And what I'll do is look at legislation that I think is going to impact us, and then I'll report that to the board. But then I'll also advocate for particular. So if there's a piece of legislation that comes out, and the ISBA and our board says that's bad legislation, we don't want that to happen. For instance, the one most recently I can think of was they wanted to make school board member positions partisan. So they wanted to make you declare whether you were a Republican or a Democrat to run for school board. And we're like, we got enough politics, we don't want it in our schools. So we lobbied against that, talked specifically to our legislators that we had at the time, and it didn't pass. Spike Gasker, our board president.
Yeah. The thing gets me is he is the best at it. We go with all these different places, and we already know all we have to do is go eat because Chris keeps us so informed. Would you not agree, Conrad?
Absolutely.
It's like it's just boring because he's right. And the other thing I want to say, I always tell people we're not the union steward. You know, we don't give direction, and we can't. You know, that's not the way it works. So, Chris, I just want to give you a chance to rest. You've been talking the whole. Nobody else.
So it's a busy, it's a busy position while we're in session. So Organization Day is coming up November 21st, and we'll find out who's on education. The 3 things that are the most important to us: Education Committee and legislation, and then Senate Finance, House Ways and Means. That's where the money comes from. So we'll be advocating and lobbying for those, and the Indiana School Board Association comes out with a list of priorities, usually around teacher salaries, around advancing education, all those areas, and we will jointly lobby as school board members around the state to make sure that certain things happen for kids and for our schools.
So as long as you've been on the board, that means you also have already been involved in a building project.
Yeah, I think I'm the, well, once Spike rides off into the sunset, you know, I'll be the only one left that went through a major building project. We've had some smaller ones, like
Right.
we've done the high school, and we've done expanded the music and choir and section at RJB. But a major building project, this, yeah, I'll have went through one of those. So, and it'll be a lot of work. So, whoever gets elected, you know, they better be prepared for late nights and angry wives, because they're not coming home till 9:30 or 10 on particular nights. So.
Thank you so much for being a good sport and showing up for us. We appreciate you.
You're most welcome.